you wanted to ask, Yani. Just go back and listen to it, and I actually put a slide. So read it so you know the answer to these questions, because the Hanbalis have a little bit more, they're a little bit specific when it comes to sujood, so different than the Shafi'is who see it to be sunnah, the whole thing. So this is they're a little bit different. So go back to last lecture and go back to the slides, because you had a question, so you get the proper answer and you're مرتاح. So ويجوز يقول المصنف رحمه الله ويجوز قضاء الفرائض فيها وفي الأوقات الثلاثة. I can't see. I can't see. This is just too. I absolutely can't see this. I don't memorize these texts by heart. Like I have to read. I have to actually read the text appropriately, or I can't do it.
It's gonna cut off from the top and bottom.
No, I'm going to go to the actual text itself here, just so I can read it.
How's that?
Hmm?
Is it too small?
It's just the resolution is just. It's okay. I can do this.
Did you turn your microphone on?
Let's catch it. Okay. So I'll just read it from here just because I can't. أوقات النهي 5 من طلوع الفجر الثاني إلى طلوع الشمس ومن طلوعها حتى ترتفع قيد الرمح وعند قيامها حتى تزول من صلاة العصر إلى غروبها وإذا شرعت فيه حتى تتم. Okay, now I know what's the problem. It's because we didn't read this piece here. Okay, now I know what we're doing. All right, very good. So he said, so the Imam, rahimahullah, is talking about sujood al-tilawa, which we talked about last, which is the last thing we talked about last week. It says, وَيَلْزَمُ الْمَأْمُومُ مُتَابَعَتَهُ فِي غَيْرِهَا. So what we talked about is that Imam should not do sujood al-tilawa in a quiet prayer. So if I'm praying dhuhr and I recite and there's a sajda, I shouldn't do a sujood. Right? And the ma'moom has the right not to follow me if he doesn't know what's going on. Like if he sees me making, he can just make ruku' or make the intention of leaving me and continuing. But if I'm reciting out loud and I go through a sajda and I make sujood, the ma'moom has to follow me. It's not optional. It's not an optional. So if the ma'moom decides not to follow me, even though he's heard me recite and I stopped at a sajda and I went down, and this is important when maybe the qira'at, not all the qira'at have sajdat at the same points. Like there's 14 sajda, that's for Hafs and Asim. Other qira'at may have sajdat in other places, or other places where they don't have a sajda, depending on the madhab. So you have to follow your imam. Even if you like, there's no sajda here in my qira'ah, fine. If your imam recited it and did sujood, you have to perform sujood. It's not optional for you. Okay. ويستحب سجود الشكر عند تجدد النعم واندفاع النقم وتبطل به صلاة غير جاهل وناس. And it is recommended for you to perform sujood al-shukr whenever, which is the prostitution, the prostration of gratefulness, whenever, or gratitude, whenever something beautiful happens that you enjoy in your life, or some musibah goes away. You don't do it in salah, and your salah is invalid if you do it. Like if you're praying and you hear good news and you go down to sujood al-shukr, you lose your prayer. Like that will invalidate your prayer, which could happen. Like if you're praying and you hear some news coming from somewhere, you have to complete your salah and then do sujood al-shukr after your prayer, not in the middle of it. If you do it in the middle of it, you lose your prayer unless this person forgot and made it. Any mistake you make by forgetfulness or without knowledge, you can always make up for it with sujood al-sahw at the end. Right? So if the person knows that he does it, then he loses the prayer. If he doesn't know, or the person forgot, then sujood al-sahw will make up for it. Then he talks about, rahmatullah, awqat al-nahi. Awqat al-nahi meaning the timings that you shouldn't, where you are recommended or told not to pray, right? Where you shouldn't be performing salawat. And the first one is from طلوع الفجر الثاني إلى طلوع الشمس. So you tell me, well, that's the time for Fajr. Yes, so you pray Fajr, and then you don't pray anything else. Because it's awqat al-nahi. You're not supposed to pray during that time. So once you pray Fajr, you don't pray any other prayer. And I see people sometimes pray Fajr and they stand up, no. Just go, and any prayer you want to pray, wait for a little bit, because it's awqat al-nahi. And then وَمِن طُلُوعِهَا حَتَّى تَرْتَفِعَ قَيْدَ رُمْحٍ. And then from the sun rising until it's around قَيْد رُمْح. Rumh is a spear. Now, I think he points out here what it is in English. That's why I put this up here, because I wanted this in translation. So from sunrise until the sun has risen a spear's length above the horizon. Oh, he doesn't talk about it. All right. So a spear's length above the horizon is around an hour to an hour and 10 minutes. Right? That's what it is. Now, some scholars make it less, because what is a spear, and what does he mean by that, and how far away are we standing, and where are we putting the spear, and what exactly are... So there's a lot of difference of opinion on this. I don't want to get into it, but usually it's safe to say around an hour. So the first two times where you're disrecommended of praying is from Al-Fajr al-Thani, which is basically the time that Salat al-Fajr begins, until sunrise, which is the time of Salat al-Fajr. So you only pray Fajr during that time, right? And then continuing until after the sun rises, until the sun is around a spear's length in the sky, which is usually an hour to an hour and a half or so afterwards. So if the sun is Shuruq at 6:19, yani by 7:30-ish, you should be okay to pray another prayer. Like that should be a reasonable time for you to do a salah. And that's usually where you would do duha, right? So it's around 7:30 would be a reasonable time until duha. وعند قيامها حتى تزول. And once it's in the middle of the sky, right, until it moves away from the middle of the sky. So once it's right in the middle of the sky, meaning right before dhuhr. So right before dhuhr until it's dhuhr time, that's another timing of this recommendation. So don't pray during that time. Wait until it goes over and it's time for dhuhr. And then you can go ahead and you can pray dhuhr, and then you can pray anything after that as well. ومن صلاة العصر إلى غروبها, and then from salat, the adhan of asr until sunset. Again, this is the time of Salat al-Asr. So you have to pray Salat al-Asr, but the idea is you don't pray anything else. Like you don't add any sunnah prayers during that time. So once you pray Asr, that's it. No more prayers are recommended. وإذا شرعت فيه حتى تتم, and then when the sun begins to set until it has completely set. So once it hits once it's at the horizon, leave it to actually fully set, meaning until after Maghrib. And these are the times that you're not supposed to pray for the Hanabila. Now other schools have slightly different opinions, but they're pretty much similar. Really, the times that you're not supposed to be praying is from Asr until after Adhan al-Maghrib. So aside from Asr, don't pray anything during that time. And then from Adhan al-Fajr until maybe an hour and a half after the sun rises, aside from Salat al-Fajr, don't pray anything else in that timing. And then every other time is pretty much open. The Hanabila add around the zenith, just around the zenith. Once the sun is kind of coming in the middle of the sky, don't pray anything until it goes beyond the zenith where dhuhr time begins. So that piece is kind of specific to the Hanabila, but it's a reasonable. There's evidence to support that. ويجوز قضاء الفرائض فيها وفي الأوقات الثلاثة فعل ركعتي طواف وإعادة جماعة ويحرم تطوع بغيرها في شيء من الأوقات الخمسة حتى ما له سبب. So you're allowed to make up for your fara'id. So if you've missed a dhuhr, for example, or let's say you missed Fajr. This is probably the most common scenario. You missed Fajr, you wake up right after sunrise, which is a unrecommended time for salah. From sunrise to it being a spear in the sky, which is an hour and a half or 2 hours, as I pointed out, that's a disrecommended time for you to pray. But that's where you woke up. You pray Fajr immediately. You pray Fajr immediately. So you make up for any missed faridah, obligatory prayer, the moment you remember that you missed it. None of these timings matter. None of these timings have any significance once you remember that you should make up for a prayer. So you can make up for a prayer, for a fard, not for a nafila, for a fard, any time during them. And then the 2 rak'ah of tawaf, and to repeat a jama'ah, you can also do, it's also allowed within these timings. So if you are going for tawaf, for example, you can in Mecca you can do 2 rak'ahs for tawaf, or rak'atay tahiyat al-masjid. All that is these are acceptable. In addition to repeating a jama'ah, if there's a reason to repeat a jama'ah. So for example, what does he mean by this? He means like if you prayed Asr, and then you come by people who are praying Asr in jama'ah. Now, technically speaking, you've already prayed Asr, so this is now this recommended time for you until Maghrib, until after Maghrib adhan, right? But you can repeat a jama'ah. That's okay, because they're praying a fard. You can repeat that jama'ah with the intention of it being a nafila, or intention of being a repetition, or a qada. وَيَحْرُمُ تَطَوُّعٌ بِغَيْرِهَا. And it's impermissible to perform tatawwu', to perform recommended prayers outside of these three examples that I gave you. Even if it's something that has a reason for it. Like even if there's a reason, even if you're like, well, I missed the sunnah of Fajr, for example, beforehand, or like even if or I want to pray 2 rak'ahs after wudu, or 2 rak'ah of tawbah, or whatever. Even if it has a reason, you just don't do it during these times, right? You push it until a time where it's permissible. And I think he points this out here, but I can't really see it. The translation should have all this in it. All right. Does he have some more details? All right, doesn't matter. So he moves on. He talks a little bit about Salat al-Jama'ah. So yes.
So the first two was from Fajr to sunrise, and then from sunrise an hour after.
Yeah.
So is there like a window at sunrise?
No. He split into because the first one is Fajr's time.
Okay.
He just wants to make it clear to you that Fajr's time as a time is its own thing. Like and then adding that later on because. It seems confusing, but he did it so he wouldn't confuse. Salat al-Fajr's time is Salat al-Fajr. Don't pray anything outside of Fajr, and then continue after that until the sun is around an hour and a half later, or a spear's length or height in the sky. So tells Salat al-Jama'ah تلزم الرجال للصلوات الخمس لا شرط ولو فعلها في بيته. So Salat al-Jama'ah is lazima for the Hanabila. It's something that is mandatory for men to perform to perform Salat Jama'ah. It's not a condition for acceptance though. Yeah. And it's seen as a wajib kifa'i. Wajib kifa'i means that it's a communal obligation. So if you were to do it at home, your Salat at home is acceptable. It's not that it's rejected. But you are obligated to do it in Jama'ah. Even if you're at home, you can do it at home in Jama'ah. So it's a way out for the Hanabila, because the Hanabila are the most strict when it comes to doing Salat al-Jama'ah for men. They see it to be obligatory. You have to come to the masjid and pray. But if you do have the ability to do a Jama'ah at home, then that should make up for it. They frown upon heavily of performing Salawat Fard at home alone. They frown upon that heavily, more than probably any other madhab does. And I think that's worth noting here. Not sure if he puts any explanation here more. So congregational prayer is required of free capable men even when there's intense fear while traveling for the 5 prayers. However, performance in a group, not a condition for the validity of prayer. One may perform congregational prayers in one's house. So that gives a little bit of a way out. So if people are visiting, the Hanafi don't say you have to get up and go and pray in the masjid. You can just pray your Jama'ah within the home, which is important. قال وتستحب صلاة أهل الثغر في مسجد واحد والأفضل لغيرهم في المسجد الذي لا تقام فيه الجماعة إلا بحضوره ثم ما كان أكثر جماعة ثم المسجد العتيق وأبعد أولى من أقرب. So this is what they point out here. So praying in the mosque is the prophetic norm. This is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. It is recommended for the women to pray separate from the men. It is offensive for this is not the translation of this, is it? It doesn't look like a translation of this. Yeah, I don't know why this is here. So, if you remember at the beginning, I pointed out to you that the translation of Zad al-Mustaqna for Sheikh Musa Ferber, who did the translation, he didn't translate Zad al-Mustaqna. He translated the explanation of Zad al-Mustaqna, which is Rawd al-Murba'. He translated one. So sometimes, like, the translation itself has way more than what the text carries in it. I don't know if this is taken from Rawd al-Murba' or not. I have to go back and look at the explanation to see if that's there or not. I don't know, it could be, but it may not be. Regardless, some of it you can just look. For me, what matters for the course is just the translation of the actual text, like in Arabic. I don't need the additional stuff. What he points out is recommended for people in defensive outposts, which is a thagr, to pray in a single mosque. For others, it's best to pray in a mosque that would not otherwise have a congregation. The one with the largest congregation and the oldest mosque further is better than closer. So this is what he explains. A thagr is where you're having, where an outpost exists for someone who's defending land, right? So that's what Ahl al-Thagr means. So it's sunnah for people who are defending land or an outpost to pray in one masjid, like to have one place where they do their salah. And for people who aren't in an outpost, like they're living in a city and it's quite open, and this problem is not there, then they pray in the masjid that wouldn't have a jama'ah otherwise. Right? So if you know that this masjid has a jama'ah and this one doesn't, then it's recommended for you to come to the jama'ah that doesn't have the masjid, that wouldn't have a jama'ah if you didn't come. That's more recommended for you to do because you are reviving a jama'ah in a masjid and that's valuable. And then you go, and that doesn't exist, then go to the biggest masjid that has the biggest jama'ah in it. And then the oldest masjid in the city. And then always try to go to something a little bit farther away versus closer. And why does he point this out? Because the Hanabila talk about this because of the ajr. They look at it as in, if you're able to, if you go a bit farther to a masjid, then you get more ajr. Which is why, when we talk about, like if you were to continue this matan into the midst of it, they disrecommend people to move right beside masajid. They tell them to keep a distance so that you can get ajr of going and coming back. And I think that's reasonable if you're living in a village in the Middle East somewhere. Here in Canada, the close words have meanings in different contexts. It's just something it's off topic, but I'll explain to you just to understand why he's saying this. It's important to me that you understand why he says these things. Like, why is he saying farther rather than closer? For us, it makes no sense because we're living in jumbo North America. So the distance from my house, from where I live, where I open my door, to the masjid that I used to lead in Syria, is the distance from my house here, right, to just getting out of Headley Drive to Oxford. Right? Just getting out of Headley Drive, like it's the same distance. Like for me to walk from my home to the masjid that I prayed in the village, here is a distance from my house, just poking my car out to Oxford. Like I just want to get on Oxford to take a left on Hyde Park and then take a right on Gainsborough. This masjid from my house is from my house to where I was imprisoned during the war. This is where it's out of my village and the second village and the third village, and it's just at the Hajjs before I get up. We don't notice that here because we all use cars and we're used to everything being far away. But for people living in small in areas where it's much more it's compounded and people are closer together. The sunnah is okay. There's a masjid that's empty or a masjid that's a bit farther. Walk, get the ajr of doing that. Don't go and live right beside it so that you get no ajr of moving around. But here, no. My house that's in driving or walking distance from the masjid so that you can actually walk. Because all of these distances they're basing them on walking distances, not on riding. Yes?
One of my friends said that it's better for you to walk than rush your way to the mosque.
If it's in walking distance. If you're 3 kilometers away, you might as well quit your job and divorce your wife and just walk back and forth to the masjid 5 times a day. So you have to, So when they're pointing this out, like in the Hanabiya, they're talking about situations where, like, if it's a walking distance, it's tops 10 minutes. Which for us, like for me, and I live close to this place. It's considered to live close. It's 10 minutes by car, which is 40 minutes walking at least, if not longer. That's if I make it alive. All right. So I just wanted to make that clear because this terminology sometimes can be confusing if you don't understand what they're referring to. They're not referring to this situation that we're in here, which is very, very abnormal. ويحرم أن يؤم في مسجد قبل إمامه الراتب إلا بإذنه أو عذره. It's haram for someone to lead a prayer in a masjid that has a imam ratib. Imam ratib is an imam that's role or job description is to lead the congregational prayers. There's a difference between an imam ratib and the imam of the masjid. Technically speaking, the imams of the masjid usually aren't the imam ratib. Like the imam of the masjid usually is not the imam who leads all 5 congregational prayers. Almost never historically was that the case. The imam ratib was a hafiz, and he was basically paid to take care of the masjid and lead the 5 prayers. The khatib jumu'ah, the person who led was the actual imam of the masjid, and that person, whenever they came in, would lead the prayer, would lead tarawih, would lead the janazah. But the imam ratib had a specific, this is a person who was specified to take care of this role. And if there is an imam ratib, the Prophet ﷺ had both roles. He was the imam of the masjid and the imam ratib as well at the same time. But later on, historically within Islamic law, within Islamic history, the roles broke off because imams weren't always around. But if the masjid has an imam ratib, has an imam that is assigned to do this, then you're not allowed to lead unless they give you permission or there is a udhr. I mean, the person is sick today, is not going to show up, so they need someone to substitute for them. And this is a big deal in masajid. We don't have this problem here, alhamdulillah. It's one of the few positive things we can say here, that we don't have these problems. Elsewhere, it becomes a big problem. Where, it's time for salah, so the imam's not here, well, we're going to pray anyways. No. If the imam is here, is he coming? Yes, then you wait. But I don't care. It doesn't matter. You wait. You have to wait. And this is something that we were actually told by our teachers to do. I've never done it before. But we were told to do this, like where you don't show up on time and people they have to wait. You have to learn to wait. It's not, it says here it's 6:45. No. If the imam is around, you have to wait. And this happened once. Remember, this happened in LMM once. And Sheikh Abdul Fattah was in the building. He was having a meeting, and it's Maghrib or Isha. You have to pray. No, we're not praying. And they told me he's here. So someone else was like, no, you don't go back. He's here. You wait until the imam comes. So it's not done like this. You have to respect the imam, or you go and ask, and he'll give you permission to lead in his absence or in his substitute him. There are certain etiquettes for this that have to be followed, and this is a good sentence that he put here, rahmatullah alayhi, that's helpful. ومن صلى ثم أقيم فرض سن أن يعيدها إلا المغرب ولا تكره إعادة الجماعة في غير مسجدي مكة والمدينة. And someone who prayed and then he comes and he finds people praying the fard, the same that he just prayed, it's sunnah to repeat it with them. It's sunnah, you don't have to. It's sunnah to do it except Maghrib. Except Maghrib, it's not sunnah to do that. Because there's some evidence the Prophet ﷺ said not to. And there's no karaha in repeating jama'ah في غير مسجدي مكة والمدينة. There's no karaha in there being more than one jama'ah in a masjid, one after the other. Like if we pray Asr and then we're done and someone else will come pray Asr, we do that. Why he's saying this? Because the Malikis don't agree. Just because there's like other schools of jurisprudence that don't agree with there being more than one jama'ah in a masjid. But the Hanabila don't have a problem with that. ولا قراءة على مأموم. وإذا أقيمت الصلاة فلا صلاة إلا المكتوبة. Once the salah is, the iqamah goes off, you're not allowed to pray anything else. Like if you come in and the iqamah is happening, you can't pray Tahiyyat al-Masjid quickly. Or the sunnah that happens before Fajr quickly. Once the iqamah starts, when he says, the only prayer that's allowed is the prayer of that the iqamah is being performed for. فإن كان في نافلة أتمها إلا أن يخشى فوات الجماعة فيقطعها. And if you're in the middle of a sunnah prayer, when the iqamah goes off, you continue it, you complete it, unless you fear that you're you're going to miss the salah altogether because of it, which is very rare. Like no one does that. But if you're someone who's for some reason you're praying in a mosque in Indonesia where they just do a quick up and down, so you don't want to miss the salah, then you can break your sunnah and pray with them. Otherwise, usually you can finish your sunnah and still be added on to the jama'ah that's going to happen. من كبر قبل سلام إمامه لحق الجماعة. Right? Whoever does takbir al-ihram before the imam does the first salamu alaykum, لحق الجماعة. It's considered that this person was prayed the salah as jama'ah. وإن لحقه راكعا دخل معه في الركعة وأجزأته التحريمة. And if you come and the imam is in ruku' and you're able to catch the ruku' with the imam, then you've catched that rak'ah. I think everyone kind of knows that. But you catch the rak'ah if you catch the ruku'. Does he go into any detail here? If he does, I want to show something to you. If not, then I'll. Okay, so you just point this out because this is how the Hanabila. So for the Hanabila, for this to work for the Hanabila, for the Hanbali madhab, you have to catch the minimal amount of ruku' before the imam leaves the minimal amount of ruku'. So the imam is like this, right? The minimal amount of ruku' is somewhere here. This is the minimal amount. It's not the optimal way to do ruku', but this is the minimal amount, where your shoulders are no longer your shoulders are not at the same level of your feet. I mean, they're hunched forward, and your hands are now touching your knees. For the Hanabila, it's touching the knees. If you've touched the knees, this is the minimal amount of ruku'ah. This is the optimal amount of ruku'ah, obviously. But this is the minimal amount, because I catch my knees. So I have to be able to achieve touching my knees before he doesn't touch his knees anymore. Like if he's down and I'm coming in, and we don't catch each other at the same time, Like I come in and he comes up and I make ruku' and we don't cross at all, then that rak'ah doesn't work. So if you come in and you say Allahu Akbar and then you go down for ruku' and before you touch your knees, you hear Sami Allahu liman hamida, right? Sometimes you can't see it, then I would consider that rak'ah not caught for the Hanbali madhab. Yes.
You have to make takbir.
Always. So you always have to do you always have to do takbir al-ihram. Always. You do takbir al-ihram and then you go ahead and whether you do it with takbir or not is not a big problem. If you don't say takbir for the second one, it's not a problem. You should technically Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. But if you don't do the second one, it's fine. But if you don't do the first one, then your salah doesn't even count. Like if you come in and you say Allahu Akbar and you didn't do takbir al-ihram appropriately, then you can end up losing the salah. Just be careful that you have to achieve the minimal amount of ruku' while the imam is achieving at least the minimal amount of ruku'. You guys have to kind of meet for at least a second or so, where you're both still in ruku'. If you don't catch him, because this is not for all madhahab, by the way, some of them are okay with you coming in, doing ruku' and then following and still consider it rak'ah. It's a lesser opinion within the madhahib for sure. I think this is the correct opinion. Like I think the Hanbali opinion here is the one that you should hold on to, but you have to make sure that you're meeting at that moment. All right. ولا قراءة على مأموم يستحب في إسرار إمامه وسكوته وإذا لم يسمعه لبعد لا لطرش ويستفتح ويستعيذ فيما يجهر فيه إمامه. So here is an important piece for understanding the Hanabila. So the follower, this is important. So the follower is not required to recite his Fatiha, since the Imam relieves him from this recitation. But it is recommended to recite to whenever the Imam is inaudible or silent, or when one does not hear him out of being distant, but not due to deafness. This is an important sentence, because this is where the Hanafis and the Hanbalis become a little bit similar. So the Hanbalis don't require you to recite Surah Al-Fatiha when the Imam is reciting. The Shafi'is do. The Hanbalis don't. They don't require it even in a salah that is sirr, even in a quiet prayer, or in the second 2 rak'ahs of Isha, for example, or the last rak'ah of Maghrib. It is recommended that you do it, but it's not required. So if you don't do it, the recitation of the Imam suffices, right? Which is what the Hanafis do. But the Hanafis say you can't read. You're supposed to not read. But the Hanbali say you should, but if you don't, it's not it. So if you're standing there behind your Imam, even in Dhuhr and Asr, even Dhuhr and Asr, all 4 rak'at, and as a ma'moom, you're not saying anything at all, like you're just sitting there quietly, for the Hanbalis, your salah is fine. It's recommended, but it's not obligatory. The Shafi'is don't see that to be the case. And this is a point of distinction that has to be clear whenever you're studying the madhab. So the follower makes the opening supplication and says, Allahu Akbar. So أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, in the prayers in which the Imam is audible, just as in the silent prayers. So you don't have to recite, but you would, when you start your salah, you would say dua istiftah. Istiftah subhanallah bihamdik wa ta'ala jadduk wa la ilaha ghayruk. And then you say أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. You can even say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and then they recite. You don't have to do any recitation. Somebody can do the isti'adah. And if you can't hear the Imam, he said this, it's important. If you can't hear the Imam because of distance, right? You can't. Then you can recite Surah Al-Fatiha. So let's say we're praying the first rak'ah of Isha, and I'm reading Surah Al-Fatiha, and someone's praying outside because there's a lot of people, and you open the doors, and then the microphone blows, and because Muhammad Faid didn't buy us a new sound system, so now the person over there can't hear me anymore. Right? So at that point they can recite Surah Al-Fatiha. Now because they can't hear. Now if the person is deaf, no, because unless they're in a place where they couldn't hear me anyway. But if they're standing in a place where they can hear me, they're just deaf, and they don't recite it, obviously, because that will be disturbing for other people. All right. So whenever a latecomer, masbuq, we can. I'll leave you to. Okay, let's read it. Right, this is not actually this is in the sharh, so I'll read it for you just for benefit. So whenever a latecomer, a masbuq, prays with the Imam is from the end of the latecomer's prayer. And whatever the latecomer makes up is from the beginning of his own prayer. After the Imam says, Assalamu alaikum, the latecomer rises, makes the opening supplication, then says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, and reads a chapter. However, if one prayed a single prayer cycle, of Maghrib, for example, or a 4-prayer cycle with the Imam, one makes the tashahhud immediately after one or more prayer cycle and sits with one's left foot under the right chin and the right foot raised, which he does tawarruk. So what does this all mean? So with the Hanabila, which is similar again, is where you make up for the raka'at that you missed. You make up, and this is the prominent position for the Hanbalis, but it's not for the majority of schools. And if you do the opposite, you're fine. But it's just important to know that the Hanbalis see it. So if you pray with me the last 2 rak'ahs of Isha, then when you stand up, you have to make 2 rak'ahs, but you have to make up the first 2. Which means you would do dua al-istiftah when you stand, and you do a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, which you do at the beginning of your prayer. Then you recite Fatiha and a surah, right? And then do that for the second rak'ah as well, and then do the tashahhud al-akhir at the end, because those are the rak'ahs that you missed. Now that's not the prominent position for a lot of the madhahib, and especially not what is taught today, because the Hanbalis shied away from this opinion the last maybe 50 years. They don't teach this as often, or they're more likely to teach the opposite. But that's what the Hanbali position is, just for your own knowledge. And if you do the opposite, if you consider that I prayed the first 2 rak'ahs with my Imam, there was no surah and whatnot, and these are the next 2, that's fine as well. Like that's totally fine as well. I'm just telling you what the Hanbali opinion here is.
Is the Hanbali the only one that's different from the other 3?
No, the Hanafis are as well. Yeah, the Hanafis are similar as well. ومن ركع أو سجد قبل إمامه فعليه أن يرفع ليأتي به بعده فإن لم يفعل عمدا بطلت وإن ركع ورفع قبل ركوع إمامه عالما عمدا بطلت وإن كان جاهلا أو ناسيا بطلت الركعة فقط وإن ركع ورفع قبل ركوعه ثم سجد قبل رفعه بطلت إلا الجاهل والناسي ويصلي تلك الركعة قضاء. So here's a couple of pieces of scenario that are important. So whoever bows or prostrates before the Imam does must rise so he can perform it after the Imam. If he deliberately does it, if he does it on purpose, then his prayer is invalidated. The prayer is invalidated if one knowingly and deliberately precedes the Imam by 2 essential elements. Rukn. For example, one bows and rises before the Imam bows. If he is ignorant of this or forgot it, then that cycle is invalidated and he has to bring it up again. But if he's not, and he did it on purpose, then his whole prayer is invalid. The prayer is invalidated if one bows and rises before the Imam bows and then prostrates before the Imam rises, unless one is ignorant or forgetful. So here's the point that he's trying to make. So let's say the Imam is praying. And this is why I have to teach people to always do takbir like midway or almost towards the end. So the person finished Fatiha and they have these, Allahu Akbar, and then he goes down. Right now, the entirety of the masjid has been, waiting for him for a couple of seconds, already doing ruku'. So if you are standing behind Imam and he says Allahu Akbar, you go down and you notice that you made it before he made it, then what you do is you go stand up again, and then you say Allahu Akbar and you go down again. So you follow him again. So you just go back and you follow him again. And you're not required to do any sujood sahw or anything like that. You just go back and follow him. Now, if you do that on purpose, if you purposely try to get to your ruku' before the Imam, your salah is invalid. Basically, you have to repeat your whole prayer. If you beat the Imam by 2 forgetful, right? By 2 meaning, for some reason, he's saying Allahu Akbar, going down to ruku', and you go down to ruku', and you come up again, and this rak'ah is now invalid. You have to repeat, you pray with your Imam, and then you make up for a rak'ah at the end, as if you came 1 rak'ah late, basically. And if you do it on purpose, then basically you invalidate your prayer by doing it. Does that make sense? So if you ever go ahead of your Imam, just to make it simple, if you ever go ahead of your Imam, and you notice, then you go back and follow him in whatever it is that you went ahead of him within. If you do that on purpose, you lose your prayer. If you beat him by 2 movements, then that rak'ah is gone. Then you continue. And I know these are very rare situations, but that's what fiqh is. Fiqh is the technicalities, explaining all the little the things that can happen and what to do when they happen. ويسن للإمام التخفيف مع الإتمام وتطويل الركعة الأولى أكثر من الثانية ويستحب انتظار داخل ما لم يشق على مأموم. So the Imam is recommended to be brief while being complete, meaning making sure that you do takhfif, and you don't recite too much and make people tired behind you. And that is a subjective point. That's not objective. There's no specific amount. The amount that I may put here in this masjid may be different than they put in a different masjid, depending on the audience that are following them and what people are used to, what the norm is. So you don't get to come and object within a masjid that you just walked into, or object in general if people are happy with things. I mean, it's not your position because this is an issue that is subjective. It will be based on what the imam is used to, what people are used to. I used to play in a masjid where they recite 2.5 pages for in each rak'ah for Fajr. And that was the norm. That was the norm. Everyone in the masjid was full and that's what people did. I can't go up and say, this is too hard. No, go pray in a different place. This is what people here are used to and this is what this takhfif is a subjective term. It is disliked for the imam to be so quick that he prevents his followers from performing what is recommended. So you can't do takhfif to the point where people aren't getting enough time to say the proper tasbihat or the proper stuff, the dua that they want to make. You have to be reasonable. The imam is recommended to make the first prayer cycle longer than the second. So this is always a sunnah for the Hanbalis. Meaning you're praying Maghrib, the first rak'ah a little bit longer than the second rak'ah. Isha, first a little bit longer than the second. Always. Always the first one, a little bit longer than the second one. It shouldn't be something that is too visible. It shouldn't be like twice the amount, but it should be a little bit longer than the second one. It's recommended for the imam to wait for an entrant who is a latecomer if it is not difficult on the followers. So this is nice. I like this is my favorite fatwas for the Hanbali madhab, that they are okay with the imam waiting if someone's coming in. Not all the madhab are okay with that. Like are okay with you even giving that intention. So, for example, I'm finishing and I say Allahu Akbar, I go down for ruku', and then I hear someone coming in. Right? It's recommended for me that as long as this is not a very long wait for people, it's not going to cause mashaqqa, for me to give him a second to join. But sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes the time I'm going to end up waiting is going to be too long because it can take the person, you have to put the shoes, you have to walk in towards the end, and by then, Hajj Hussein is already going to yell at me after Salah. So I don't have to do it. So you have to be very careful with the timing that it's going to actually look at. But if you're praying, for example, if you're praying a jama'ah at home, and you do ruku' and you hear someone coming to join, you can wait for them to join. Like the Hanbali madhab is okay with you waiting for them to come and join. All right. وإذا استأذنت المرأة إلى المسجد كره منعها وبيتها خير لها. The woman asks to go to the masjid. It's offensive. It's makruh for her not to be denied the right to go and pray in the masjid. Her father, we'll talk about this inshallah next. وبيتها خير لها, and for her to pray at home in terms of ajr is better for her. Meaning she gets more ajr. Here's the distinction. For a man, there's more ajr in praying in the masjid. For a woman, there's more ajr in praying in her house. All comes down to priorities. It doesn't mean that men cannot pray in their homes. It doesn't mean that women cannot pray in their masajid, right? So there's always going to be a certain degree of, if she's coming to attend halaqah or attending jumu'ah or attending, and that is all within permissibility. But she's not recommended to come for all 5 prayers. The men are, especially if they are allowed, meaning their time allows them to do so. Like as a Muslim, if your time allows you and you're close, then you should be praying the masjid as much as possible. Women, they don't have to do any of that. Like that's not what they're recommended to do, actually, because it's their household that is their priorities rather than their non-Muslims. So we'll start with that, inshallah ta'ala. We'll continue. Next week we'll probably start a little bit earlier. Yes?
I haven't seen anything about if you pay extra rak'ahs, does that invalidate the prayers, for example, if you've forgotten 3 6 rak'ahs?
Yeah, so if you forgot, no, we talked about this in last week.
Right,
So
okay.
you just make sujood sahu at the end of it.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you forgot, you'll make sujood sahu at the end of it if you went overboard. If you did it on purpose, it invalidates your prayer, but if you forgot, then you do sujood sahu, and that should be enough, inshallah ta'ala. And you do sujood sahu before taslim, before the end of prayer. So I talked about sujood sahu in some depth listen to the last one. If you still have questions, I'll answer. Jazakumullah khair. Subhanakallah bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Inshallah, next week will be our last session, inshallah, before the end of the semester. Barakallah. So make it that for us.